Let's look at the next question here. Do you have a game-changing cost structure? Now, this is an interesting question because obviously every company has to look at costs. But some organizations have cost structures that are substantially different and better than the cost structures of their competitors. So again, we're going to look at an example to illustrate this point, to illustrate the business model mechanics behind this question. And we're going to look at the business model that this guy here built, Niklas Zennström, together with Janus Friis, the business model of Skype. But before looking at Skype, we're going to look at the business model that telecom operators had for calls before Skype came into the market. So, telecom operators would offer calls through their own channels, often physical stores to sell that, and then installations of lines to a local market. Why local market? Because telecoms can only offer services where they have their networks. At least for a very long time that was the case. And then they would earn revenue streams from selling the calls, either through asking you to pay for minutes or a fixed fee. That's how the business model worked. Okay? Now, to make this happen, telecom operators had to invest in network development and maintenance in local networks to build them up, which required huge capital expenditures. It's not cheap to build networks, as you can imagine. Now, the problem with that business model design is, with these business model mechanics, is that offering calls require a pretty expensive network. So they had to build up all this infrastructure and then only later on make money from it. Now let's look at what happened when Skype came into the market. So Skype started offering free calls, even more powerful, free video calls if you would call from Skype to Skype. What they had to put in place is a voice over IP software that would allow people to make calls over the internet. So Skype requires no network because the calls go through the internet. Obviously, once you start using the internet as an internet company, the global market is yours. So they were targeting users globally. What we have to consider here is that for users to use Skype, they had to have access to the internet. So it's very important for Skype to assure that users have access to the internet because all the calls go through the internet. And what's interesting here is that this was not a cost that Skype incurred. So they could offer calls for free. So let's look at what's different between a telco operator and Skype. Well, there are no capital expenditures, or not in the same way as in a telco if you look at Skype's business model. What they had to do is develop software that would route the calls through the internet. In terms of cost structure, this is really interesting because software requires lower capital expenditures than the network. There are fixed costs because you have to have great developers and you put a lot of intellectual property in that, but it's a very different and better cost structure to offer calls than what telcos had in place. Another example here, pretty interesting, also in the telecom industry, is Bharti Airtel, a mobile phone operator, in fact one of the very biggest in the world. At a time when everybody was still considering the network as the core asset, the key resource, Bharti Airtel said, no, we're going to outsource all our IT and network infrastructure because that is not our core. The core is offering services to customers. And they performed extremely well on a game-changing cost structure because they got rid of the most expensive thing, the cost structures. So let's look at your business model. How do you perform on your cost structure? Is it very similar to most other companies, maybe a little bit better? Then you're on the left-hand side. Or do you have a substantially better cost structure than your competitors? Then you're on the right-hand side of this scale.